I'm Jason Burnham with Halyard Health. I lead our outbreak preparedness group with focus on solutions and new technologies in pandemic preparedness, particularly focus on PPE. I'll be talking today about 3 basic steps to get started in planning your strategic supply for an outbreak. So of course, outbreaks don't happen when we want them to. In the past dozen years or so, we've seen numerous, over a dozen in the past 10 years alone. What we see in that, specifically in protective apparel and equipment, is specific spikes that happen over and over again, but not on a regular pattern. So of course that makes it difficult for you in supply chain to prepare. And we want to provide a few steps for you to think about how to prepare for those PPE surges. Much like our home preparation for emergencies, different scenarios are important. Are you prepared for hours, days, or even weeks? There's a few examples that we draw from when we think about human behavior in preparing for home emergencies. The same corollaries apply when preparing for your healthcare facility for emergencies and necessary PPE you need in these outbreaks. So specific with scenario preparation, we'd encourage you to think about preparing for at least 2 scenarios. Seasonal flu is certainly top of mind given the past and recent outbreaks, but beyond flu, there's pandemic flu, and then unique pathogens are something that have popped up regularly over the past few years. So with seasonal flu and pandemic flu, very common PPE bundles are typical. Think about building off of those and preparing for unique pathogens. Could be for Ebola or something similar, actually more regional or local to your facility, whether it's meningitis, Zika. But think about multiple scenarios in your planning, and that's our first tip, because multiple stockpiles that we review typically don't have more than 1 scenario planned for. There are some tools available. OSHA has done a very good job of building a matrix to look at a number of different work tasks involved in preparedness and what PPE would be required for the healthcare users. And the CDC has built a very nice calculator to help determine by scenario, by staffing per that scenario, what a total PPE bundle would look like. The combination of those two with some good guidance from your suppliers should help you build a stock that's strategic and built for multiple scenarios. The second piece of guidance we would give you around outbreak preparedness is to, what we call in manufacturing, walk the mezzanine. Now what does that mean? Over the years in my history in manufacturing and engineering and operations, if you ever wanted to see how your operation was moving, you would get up high, look down, and watch the operations in live time. Watch the workers, watch the flow of materials, watch the flow of the product being worked on. Same applies in healthcare. Walking the mezzanine is a good analogy for getting above the operation. Now I know you do that in everyday operations, but it's important to do that with your emergency plan, because in an emergency people are in motion, things move quickly, and the processes are usually changed. So besides the paper exercise of understanding your PPE quantities, you'll want to simulate the environment and see what you might be missing from supplies, whether it's having observers in place, a higher number of staff in a situation where you might need more people in the environment, and higher frequency of changes of PPE because people are hot, their tasks are more rigorous, and other scenarios. So be sure to simulate, or as we call it, walk the mezzanine. Finally, the third step is what we call fear of missing out and avoiding that fear. What's fear of missing out, or FOMO? Well, in our personal lives, it's, as we know in Georgia, when a snowflake or two hit the ground, the bread and the milk are all gone. So we want to avoid that same environment in the healthcare facilities. Now what that fear usually drives is a run on the bank, a run on the store, a run on the supply chain. We want to help dissipate that fear really by, beyond the local stock that you build, knowing your suppliers, knowing their suppliers. So put the pressure on your suppliers to come in and educate you on how responsive they are, how reliable their supply chain is. Do they depend on the same shipping lanes and boats that Amazon and Santa Claus are depending on in the winter to get their supplies across the water? Or do they have more flexible, nimble supply chains? Those are important to help you avoid the feeling that you need to stock to cover their shortfalls. So in summary, Plan multiple scenarios. Walk the mezzanine. Make sure you understand how the operation will take place when a real emergency or outbreak hit. And then know your suppliers' suppliers to help you avoid the fear that you need to stock everything locally for whatever events may come. Thanks again for watching. Hope these 3 tips helped you with your pandemic planning. Again, I'm Jason Burnham with Halyard Health.